Yesterday in Mark chapter 1, we discussed three Old Testament reasons why Jesus was doing miracles and what they confirmed about him. Today in Mark chapter 2, I'm going to give you two more reasons he's doing the miracles that he's doing and talk about how they relate to his teaching, all in the 3 to 5 insights from this chapter of the Gospel of Mark. Let's dive in. Mark chapter 2 is really focused on the authority of Jesus that's communicated through the miracles, his abilities to do things that we might not necessarily associate with the ability to, say, heal the sick or the lame or cast out demons. The very first account in Mark chapter 2 is the healing of the lame man in Capernaum. We heard about this in Matthew, but we didn't really get the whole story. In Mark's account, we're told that this man was lame, that they could not get him through the door. They actually had to climb up onto the roof, take the roof apart after digging down through the thatch, and let the man in so that he was lying on a pallet in front of Jesus. Verse 5 is where we're going to pick up in the narrative. And Jesus, seeing their faith, said to the paralytic, "Son, your sins are forgiven." Two things that Jesus says right here related to why he's doing this miracle. Number one, the faith of those people that approached him. It's not to say that he couldn't do it if they didn't believe, but this is something that we saw emphasized over in Matthew chapter 17, as well as Matthew chapter 8, where Jesus commends the faith of someone who's seeking for him to do a miracle. That commendable faith was always something that would motivate Jesus to stop and listen to a request from someone who was seeking him and coming to him. The second thing is that this miracle is going to prove that he has an authority that's actually going to cause a schism between him and the Pharisees. And it did in Matthew as well. That what we're seeing is that Jesus's miracles prove that he has the ability to forgive sins. Why? Because if he didn't, and he said your sins are forgiven, then he wouldn't be able to do the miracle. But we see some of the scribes were sitting there and reasoning in their hearts. Why does this man speak that way? He is blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone? Jesus, aware in his spirit that they were reasoning this within themselves, said to them, "Why are you reasoning about these things in your hearts?" I want you to see something here. And I would even call this insight number 2. The first is the reason for the miracles that we're tracking here. But insight number 2 from this particular passage is that Jesus knows the hearts of those who are against him. So just like he knew the faith of those that were seeking him, he knew the hearts of those who were against him. This really isn't a legal question that the scribes and the Pharisees are wrangling with. Did he commit blasphemy or didn't he? It's emanating from their heart. They don't like that he's done this. And so he said to them, "Why are you reasoning about these things in your heart? Which is easier to say to the paralytic, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Get up and pick up your pallet and walk'? But so that you may know that the Son of Man," Daniel 7 reference, definitely want to copy that one down. But Daniel 7 reference right there, Son of Man has the authority on earth to forgive sins. He said to the paralytic, "I say to you, get up, pick up your pallet and go home." And he got up and immediately picked up his pallet and went out in sight of everyone, so that they were amazed and were glorifying God, saying, "We have never seen anything like this." So there's your third insight. You got a Daniel 7 Son of Man reference here. Jesus is referring to his authority. Calling himself the Son of Man is the equivalent of calling himself the Son of God. Basically, what he's saying is, I'm the one you're looking for. I'm the one who's supposed to sit on David's throne. I'm the one that the Almighty is going to give authority to reign over all creation. You can imagine how that gains authenticity in the eyes of the people when Jesus says your sins are forgiven and then proves that he can do that by telling the man to get up and walk. Again, we see this statement, and this is not one of your 3 to 5 insights, in verse 13, that the people were coming out to him in large crowds. We then have the calling of Matthew, and you'll remember from Matthew's gospel, that was not very well received, that he was going in and eating. He called Matthew to come and follow him, and that he went and had dinner at his house, and that Matthew invited his friends that were sinners and tax collectors to come hear Jesus. And the Pharisees didn't like that. They probably didn't like that because of the previous encounter in Capernaum. But here we see Jesus replies to their charge about, isn't it wrong to eat with sinners and tax collectors? It is not those who are healthy that need a physician, but those who are sick. I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Jesus, we know from Matthew 23, and I would make this note as your fourth insight, Jesus is not calling the Pharisees righteous. What he is saying is that the only people that are going to respond to the invitation are going to be the people who can see themselves as sinners. The reason why people came to Jesus wasn't just for the miracles that he could do, but what drew them was he was teaching a message that you can be free from your sin. That's what was really intriguing to the people. The miracles were just a validation for that. And we're still tracking that first point on the different reasons why Jesus is doing miracles. Mark then records the same statement that we see in Matthew 9, the question about why Jesus's disciples don't fast. And Jesus's answer doesn't change. Basically, it's not time for them to fast. So as long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. I would put, and this is a bonus point, I would put a Matthew 25 reference right here, parable of the wise and the foolish virgin. So Matthew 25, 1 through 10. I would put a marker right there. Jesus is calling himself the bridegroom. Now, that is Old Testament language. Jesus is connecting with an Old Testament image here, saying, I am the groom. I'm calling my faithful bride to me. This not only clarifies why Jesus is doing the miracles that he's doing and teaching the things that he's teaching, but it clarifies for us why the Pharisees and the scribes are unable to come to him even though they see the miracles. He says, no one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment. Otherwise, the patch pulls away from it, the new from the old, and a worse tear results. No one puts new wine into old wineskin. Otherwise, the wine will burst the skin, and the wine is lost, and the skin as well. But one puts wine into a fresh wineskin. So here's what you see. You have a connection, I would say, back to Matthew 21, the parable of the landowner and the vineyard workers or the vine dressers. Remember, when we were going through Matthew 21, we said the Pharisees clearly knew who Jesus was, that it was a heart problem. It wasn't that they were deceived. It wasn't that they weren't aware. It wasn't that they couldn't connect the dots. They didn't want to believe. And what Jesus is saying is the biggest impediment to their believing his miracle, and this rounds out your first insight, by the way, the biggest thing that stood between the Pharisees and Jesus was not that they didn't believe in the miracles. It was that their heart was hard. Their heart was hard. I would also write Ezekiel 36, 26, 27, and 28 beside this verse. I would journal this. If you hadn't picked up journaling Bibles, they're there in the description. Check out that link. But I would definitely make a note of that. This chapter ends with Jesus being questioned about the Sabbath, and this is essentially the exact same story that we see over in Matthew chapter 12 about the disciples eating, going through the grain fields. Are they doing what's unlawful on the Sabbath? Are they not? He uses the same example about David eating the showbread and how it is that ultimately he comes to this statement at the end of the chapter, which is sort of a clarification on the Sabbath and something that the leaders and the scribes and the Pharisees had missed. The Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. So the purpose of the Sabbath, while it was to glorify God, it was good for man. The purpose of the Sabbath wasn't to glorify the Sabbath. And he says, that's the way you're treating it. The Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. So again, he's making a Daniel 7 reference, but he's saying basically the Sabbath is under my purview. And the way you're teaching it is emphasizing the glory of the Sabbath instead of the glory of God and it being good for men. Okay, so that's your insights. I want to hear in the comments, what did you think about the reasons Jesus was doing these miracles? Did you get something new out of it? If you did, I want to see it in the comments. It's time for you to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode of the Daily Bible Insight. And until I see you Monday to talk about Mark chapter 3, have a good day and God bless.